It started with the sound of glass hitting marble, clean, high-pitched, like the opening note of a symphony nobody knew was about to begin. That wasn't the moment everything fell apart. That came 33 minutes later. But if you want the truth, that was the sound that warned me the air in our house was about to change forever. People were everywhere. Suits, sequins, cologne that clung too hard to everyone's skin. The kind of party where you recognize faces but forget names, where conversations float on shallow charm and everyone pretends to care what the other person does for a living. I was in the middle of refilling someone's whiskey when I saw her by the fireplace. My wife. Her lips were painted too red for this kind of night, and she was leaning a little too comfortably against the armrest of a couch, talking to a man I didn't invite. Noticed isn't the right word. You feel these things. Like a flicker in the corner of your vision you're not supposed to turn toward. He wasn't better looking than me. That wasn't what shook me. It was the casualness between them. The easiness in her shoulders. The kind of ease you only see between two people who've done something irreversible and now live in the afterglow of it. They didn't touch. But they didn't have to. I walked over. Not because I wanted to, because I needed to. I didn't say a word. Just stood near enough that they'd feel my presence. She glanced at me with a hollow smile, the kind you give a neighbor on trash day. He didn't even look away. He stayed leaned back, grinning faintly like he was in on a joke and I hadn't been told the punchline yet. Then, as if on cue, someone bumped into me, spilled a bit of wine on my sleeve, and the moment scattered. By the time I looked back, the man was walking away unhurried like he belonged in my house. I followed. Not like a man follows another to start a fight. Like a man follows a trail he didn't ask to find. He went down the hallway, turned left, and disappeared into the guest bathroom. I waited. 10 seconds. 15. Then I opened the door without knocking. He wasn't alone. She was in there. They weren't touching. That would have been easier. No, she was holding something. His jacket. She was laughing quietly, biting her lip like she was trying not to be heard. When they saw me, they didn't jump. They didn't panic. They looked at me the way you look at someone who showed up to the wrong meeting. I didn't speak. I just stared at the thing in her hand. His blazer. Her fingers pressed against the collar like it belonged to her. And then, in the most casual voice I've ever heard, she said he spilled wine on it. I offered to help. That was the explanation. That was her version of the truth. I didn't answer. I just stepped back and let the door close between us. Back in the living room, someone was telling a story about a trip to Croatia. I smiled at them like nothing was wrong. I nodded in the right places. And then I saw him again 10 minutes later, back among the crowd, drink in hand, laughing with two people I barely knew. Like the bathroom had never happened. Like my marriage wasn't being shredded in real time. And that's when he did it. He reached into his coat pocket, her fingerprints still fresh on it, and pulled something out. Something small and lacy. Then, with the kind of grin that belongs to the deeply cruel or the deeply confident, he turned and threw it at me. A bra. Her bra. Right in front of everyone. It hit my chest and fell to the floor between my shoes like a dead bird. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Someone gasped, but nobody moved. I bent down. Picked it up. I smiled. A real smile. Then I raised my voice just loud enough for everyone to hear and said something that cut through the music, the drinks, the fake affection like a scalpel. You might want to hold on to this, friend. You'll need it when she tells you the baby's yours. And the room went silent. Nobody moved. The silence that followed wasn't the kind that comes from shock. It was surgical. Precise. A room full of people frozen in a single breath, caught between pretending not to have seen what just happened and wondering if it was too late to quietly leave. He didn't laugh this time. The man who threw her bra at me, he just stood there, suddenly very aware of the attention he'd invited. His smug expression cracked, only slightly but enough. Enough for me to see that he hadn't expected me to have anything in my pocket. Certainly not that. My wife, she didn't flinch. That was the part that stuck with me most. She didn't run over, didn't cry or scream or even pretend to be embarrassed. She walked over slowly as if she were approaching a mildly inconvenient spill on the kitchen floor. Her face was unreadable, a porcelain mask painted with faint irritation. You're being dramatic, she said softly, like it was just us in the room. I didn't take my eyes off the other man. You might want to talk to her, I said to him, handing him the bra as though it were a forgotten wallet. She's been hiding more than this. He looked at her. She didn't look back. Instead, she turned to me, her voice low and tight. Why would you say that? Now it was my turn. I stepped forward slowly and pulled something from my pocket. A small envelope. Yellow. Slightly torn at the corner. I let it fall onto the coffee table beside us. It landed softly. She looked at it like it was nothing. He didn't. He looked like someone had just introduced him to gravity for the first time. I waited. You've been intercepting the tests, I said. Clinic called while you were in the shower. Twice. Funny how that works. Her lip twitched. Not quite a reaction. Just a micro flicker of the face she hides when she's calculating. The one you took with him didn't work out, did it? And the one before him? Or was it someone else that time? It's hard to keep track when your house has more secrets than walls. She turned away, not because she was ashamed, but because she knew every eye was on her now and she didn't want to perform for free. I let the silence hang. It was mine now. Then one of our mutual friends, Sharon, I think, finally found her voice. Wait, what is going on? That broke the seal. Whispers fluttered around the room like flies around meat. People started gathering their coats, making excuses. Nobody wanted to be caught in the blast radius of whatever was happening. My wife turned back to me. You just embarrassed yourself in front of everyone. No, I said. You embarrassed me. I'm just returning the favor. And then I left the room. Not storming out. Not slamming doors. I walked slowly, calmly. Every step was a rope being cut, every breath lighter. I didn't go to the bedroom. Didn't grab a jacket. I just stepped out the front door into the night, into the cold that didn't feel cold anymore. Behind me, the house kept buzzing. The whispers would grow into stories. The stories would mutate. They'd all have different versions of what happened. But only 3 of us would ever know the truth. And only one of us had just started rewriting the story. I didn't sleep that night. I walked. Street after street, shoes soaking through from puddles I couldn't see and didn't care to avoid. The city was still alive even if I wasn't sure I was. Somewhere between the park bench I sat on for an hour and the diner I didn't enter, the adrenaline wore off. What was left behind wasn't sadness. Not yet. It was something heavier. She hadn't followed. That mattered. More than anything else that night, that was the detail that kept returning. No door opened behind me. No voice called out. Nothing. Like I'd walked out of a movie she was bored of halfway through. Let the credits roll without her. By sunrise, I was back in front of the house. Lights still on. Curtains half drawn. A wine glass on the porch railing untouched. The kind of detail that makes you wonder how much of your life was ever really yours. I didn't go inside. Instead, I stood there until a car pulled up to the curb. The same car from the party. The same man behind the wheel. He didn't see me at first. He was on his phone, laughing, actually laughing. Then he caught my figure in the corner of his eye and froze. I didn't move. Just watched him. Watched the recognition crawl across his face, then the discomfort, then the instinct to look away. He rolled down the window. She told me you knew, he said carefully. I walked to the driver's side, leaned down slightly. She tell you why she lied to both of us? He blinked. She said you've been distant. That it wasn't working. I smiled, not kindly. She also tell you she was trying for a baby with me while she was stringing you along like a pet project? He said nothing. She uses people. It's not personal. Not to her. He looked down, then back at the house. I didn't know about the test. Yeah, neither did I. Until the clinic started leaving voicemails. His jaw clenched. Good. A sliver of realization. I could have punched him then, but it would have been for all the wrong reasons. He was just another piece in her performance. I was the only one who ever bought a front row ticket. She told me it was just once, he said, voice thinner now. That's the worst part. She probably believes that. I stepped back and watched him pull away. He didn't look back. That was fine. When I finally went inside, the house was silent. Furniture still in perfect alignment. Her shoes by the door. She wasn't there. She'd left too, but with nowhere to go, nowhere to retreat to but whatever mask she'd wear next. On the coffee table, the yellow envelope was gone. In its place, a note written in her delicate, calculated handwriting. Just 3 words. You humiliated us. Not me, not yourself. Us. As if her betrayal and my response were equal in weight, equal in sin. As if the truth had ruined something precious, not exposed it for what it always was. I sat down on the couch. Not because I was tired. Because the moment demanded it. I picked up the glass he'd thrown, still there, a faint lip mark on the rim, and set it gently on the table. And then I did something strange. I laughed. Not loud. Not bitter. A hollow chuckle that belonged to a man who'd finally learned the rules of a game he never knew he was playing. And then I picked up my phone. There was one more person who needed to hear from me. Someone who'd been quiet too long. The friend who told me to watch her. Who saw what I refused to. Who warned me twice. And I hadn't listened. Not then. But I was listening now. He picked up on the second ring. I hadn't spoken to him in over a month, not since the first time he'd hinted that something was off. I hadn't liked what he said. Told him to mind his own marriage. Now, I owed him more than a conversation. I owed him the truth. You were right, I said. He didn't ask what I meant. Just exhaled slowly and said, I know. We met an hour later at a 24-hour cafe that smelled like burnt toast and permanent mistakes. He looked tired, but not surprised. There was a look people get when they've watched a building crumble for months and are just waiting for the dust to clear. That's how he looked at me. She's been circling him for weeks, he said. I wasn't sure at first, but she didn't hide it well. Not when she thought no one was paying attention. She counted on me not paying attention, I said. That's her whole trick. He stirred his coffee absently. You don't deserve this. That's not the point, I said. She doesn't care what I deserve. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, traffic crept by and the sun was trying its best to make the world look normal again. But nothing felt normal. Everything felt sharpened. My breath, my thoughts, the edges of my skin. Then I told him something I hadn't told anyone. She wasn't just cheating, I said. She was making sure no one ever found out which lie was real. She's been weaving one version of our life to me and another to him and probably another to God knows who else. She had a plan. I just wasn't in it. He nodded slowly and I could see him processing it not as gossip but as a warning. A cautionary tale? She thinks I'll come crawling back, I said. She left that note in our living room like it was a verdict. She thinks silence is power. He leaned forward. What are you going to do? And that's when something shifted. I'm going to clean the house, I said. Not out of routine. Not to win her back. Not even out of spite. I was going to erase her. I left the cafe with a strange sense of purpose. Not angry. Not weeping. Focused. When I got home, I started packing. Everything that belonged to her gone. Perfume bottles, scarves, the books she never read but kept for aesthetic, the fake succulents in the bathroom she insisted made the place feel fresh. Into boxes. Not thrown. Placed. Deliberate. Each item a confession folded into cardboard. Her phone charger. Her robe. That one mug she never let me use. By noon, there were 5 boxes by the front door. At 2:17 p.m. she walked in. She stopped cold when she saw them. What's this? She asked, her voice flat but her eyes scanning everything. A favor, I said. For both of us. She didn't look at me. Just stared at the boxes like they'd spoken first. You're being emotional, she said. I laughed once, sharp. No. I was emotional last night. This is something else entirely. She walked over to the smallest box, the one with her scarves and earrings. Picked up a piece of tissue paper, turned it over like it might give her leverage. You don't get to control the narrative, she said. No, I said. But I do get to end it. Then I handed her an envelope. Not yellow this time. White. Heavy. My lawyer's card inside. She looked at it. No tears. No outburst. Just a blink. Then another. This is ridiculous, she said. No, I repeated calmly. What you did was ridiculous. This is necessary. She looked at me like she was waiting for something, maybe for me to back down, maybe for the door to open and someone to stop this. But nobody came. And I didn't flinch. She left with the boxes. She didn't slam the door. She didn't say goodbye. And still, somehow, that silence was louder than anything she'd ever screamed. The first night alone in the house was quiet in the way cemeteries are quiet, peaceful on the surface, but beneath it, everything whispers. I didn't touch her bedroom. Not yet. I slept on a couch with a blanket I found in the laundry room when I didn't even know we had. It smelled like detergent and distance. I kept the lights off, the windows open. The air that came in was sharp and I welcomed it. Every breeze felt like it was sweeping her scent out of the walls. I didn't cry. I didn't punch anything. I made tea. Sat in the dark. Thought about the lies I had accepted just because they were easier than confrontation. She had trained me. Subtly. Not to ask too many questions. Not to expect real affection unless it was a performance for someone else. Her love came in curated moments, Instagrammable smiles, perfect dinner parties, compliments that felt like stage lines. But it hit me then, she had been slowly removing me from my own life. Every decision she made was designed to keep me agreeable, compliant, second-guessing my instincts. And I let her. Because I wanted to believe I was building something real with someone who, in truth, had no intention of keeping the blueprint. The next morning, the first text came in. Unknown number, he didn't know. I promise. I told him we were separated. I stared at the message for a long time. Then blocked the number. An hour later, a mutual friend messaged me. Someone who had been at the party. Their words were cautious, but the intent was clear. We didn't know she was like that. Are you okay? I didn't reply. I wasn't ready to play the victim. I wasn't ready to be pitted. I was still stitching together a man who had been unmade in a room full of people who toasted to our happiness with full glasses and empty minds. By noon, I was cleaning again. But not like before. This time, I started with our closet. My closet, now? I threw out everything that reminded me of the image I'd worn for her approval, the shirts she said made me look sharp, the cologne she'd bought and insisted I use. I kept the things I'd stopped wearing because they weren't her taste. They were mine. And then I found the old notebook. The one I used to write in before we got married. Notes, thoughts, half-finished stories. I didn't even know it was still here, tucked behind a box of her old purses. Inside was a line I'd written years ago in the early days, back when love still felt like a garden we were both watering. A lie is only dangerous when it's beautiful enough to believe. I stared at that line for a long time. It was the truth and it was prophecy. Later that evening, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it without hesitation. It wasn't her. It was the man. The one from the party. The one who threw her bra at me like it was a challenge and I wasn't supposed to respond. His eyes were bloodshot. His hands in his pockets. He didn't look angry. He looked defeated. I didn't come here to fight, he said. I know, I said, stepping outside and closing the door behind me. He hesitated. She told me everything. I waited. She said you lied. That you made it all up to humiliate her. That almost made me laugh. Almost? What do you believe? I asked. He looked away, then back at me. I'm not sure anymore. That was enough. I walked down the steps, stood in front of him, and looked him in the eye. Whatever she told you, I said, ask yourself why she's telling it now. When the lights are off. When the show's over. He didn't speak. Just nodded once. Slowly. Then turned and walked away. And I went back inside. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. Cold, but clear. And somewhere, beneath the stillness of that moment, I knew. This wasn't rock bottom. It was the foundation point. 3 days passed. The house was too clean. It looked like a hotel room waiting for a guest who'd never arrive. I didn't miss her, not in the way most people define missing. What I felt was more surgical, a kind of phantom presence. Like the echo of someone who used to stand in doorways and fill silences with judgment dressed as casual questions. But the world didn't stop turning just because my marriage did. My job called. My mother texted. Friends reached out to schedule coffees they didn't really want. Everyone suddenly had a version of my story and none of them asked if I wanted to hear it. I ignored them all. Not out of bitterness. Out of necessity. It was the 7th message from her that broke the silence. Not a call. Not a knock. A single line in a text. Can we talk privately? I stared at it. She hadn't apologized. Hadn't asked if I was okay. Just that. The same manipulative brevity she used when she wanted something. I replied. 1 hour. Neutral place. We met at a small bench in the park behind the art museum. We used to come here when we first moved to the city before dinner reservations and networking parties became more important than conversation. She was already seated when I arrived, dressed in the same polished composure she always wore when she wanted control. I didn't sit. She looked up, cool and unreadable. I didn't expect you to respond. I didn't do it for you. She crossed her legs, the motion sharp. I came to clear the air. The air's already clear, I said. You just don't like how it smells now. That got to her, just a flicker, a twitch at the corner of her eye. You humiliated me, she said. I smiled because it was the only response that felt honest. You did that all on your own. I just made sure everyone saw the reflection. Do you think you're some kind of hero now? She snapped. No. I think I was the only honest one in the room. She stood up then, sudden. You ruined everything. That was the sentence. The one that told me she still didn't understand. She thought the night of the party was the fall. She didn't see that everything had already collapsed long before the guests arrived. You ruined everything, she repeated, this time quieter. You embarrassed me. You made people talk. They were already talking, I said. You just liked it better when they were whispering behind my back. She took a step closer as if proximity would make her words land harder. I was bored. You stopped trying. You made everything about safety and routines. And there it was. The honesty she never had the courage to say when it could have made a difference. I nodded slowly. I gave you stability. You wanted spectacle. So you lit the house on fire and blamed me for the smoke. She didn't speak after that. Not for a while. Then she reached into her purse and handed me a small envelope. Her handwriting on the front. What's this? I asked. My version of the truth, she said. If you care to read it. I didn't take it. You don't get to give me a script now, I said. I already walked off your stage. She blinked, stunned into silence. She hadn't expected that. She expected guilt, a crack, a reconsideration. Instead, I stepped back. And then said the words I'd waited weeks to say. We're done. Not just legally. Emotionally. You can keep the lies. I'm keeping the clarity. I turned and walked away without looking back. And I didn't stop walking until her presence had burned off my skin like mist in the morning sun. The week that followed was a strange kind of freedom, an uninvited one. The type of freedom that arrives after an explosion when the dust is still in the air but there's no longer anything left to collapse. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped looking at the doorway waiting for a shadow. Instead, I started noticing things I hadn't paid attention to in years. The hum of the refrigerator at night. The slight creak in the hallway floorboards. The way the silence in the house now felt earned, not imposed. But just when I thought the aftermath had finally begun to settle, the second wave hit. A letter arrived. No return address. Postmarked from 2 towns over. Inside, a single sheet of paper typed. No greeting. No signature. The message was simple. She's done this before. You're not the first. You're just the first who said it out loud. I sat down. Let the letter rest on the table. Read it again. 3 times. It didn't make sense at first, not the content, but the timing. Why now? Who sent it? And why send it at all? Then I remembered something she once said years ago when she'd had too much wine and not enough restraint. Everyone has a past. Some people just bury it deeper. I had thought it was poetic. Now I wondered if it had been a confession. I didn't tell anyone about the letter. Not yet. Instead, I began pulling threads. Quietly. I reached out to someone she once worked with, an old colleague, someone I remembered from our wedding list. We hadn't spoken in years, but she remembered me. Her tone on the phone changed the second I mentioned my wife's name. She didn't tell you? She asked, careful. Tell me what? A pause. Then a sigh. She almost got fired 2 years ago. There was a situation. Someone filed a complaint. HR covered it up because of her connections. What kind of complaint? Another pause. Longer. She was involved with someone's husband. It got messy. I only know because the wife showed up one day. Screaming. Security got called. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. My silence was its own sentence. She's good at making you feel like it's your fault, the colleague added. That's her thing. She makes you think you missed something. I thanked her. Hung up. Sat back and let the weight of it press down. This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern. The man from the party wasn't special. Neither was I. We were cast members in a rotation of carefully staged deceptions. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt liberation. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about escape. I started making lists. Not of her lies. Of my own truths. What I wanted. What I refused to compromise again. What I would never allow in my life, even dressed in charm or whispered in softness. And then I did something she would never expect. I called the man. The one who threw the bra. He sounded surprised but not hostile. Why are you calling me? I have something you should read, I said. It's about her. It's not revenge. It's survival. He hesitated. She told me you try to poison everything. I laughed. A dry, quiet sound. She's been poisoning us all for years. I'm just handing you the antidote. We agreed to meet in public. Bright daylight. Neutral ground. Because now I wasn't just ending a marriage. I was dismantling a myth. We met at a busy cafe with wide windows and no shadows. It was the kind of place where people bring laptops and pretend they're writing novels, where the baristas know too much about therapy and not enough about coffee. Perfect place for truth. He was already there when I arrived. Sitting alone, 2 cups on the table, one full, one untouched. The second wasn't for me. He just didn't want to look like he was waiting. I sat down without a handshake. He leaned back, guarded. So what's this about? I didn't answer right away. I pulled a folder from my coat and slid it across the table. Inside, a copy of the anonymous letter, a printed transcript of my conversation with her old colleague, and a few screenshots from online forums I'd stumbled across, places where stories are told in whispers, half-confessions that pointed to the same pattern. She's not new at this, I said. You just didn't know the script. He didn't touch the folder. Just stared at it like it might bite him. I thought she cared, he said quietly. She cared about being wanted, I said. She cared about winning. But the moment you stop playing, she calls it betrayal. He rubbed his jaw, agitated. She said you were unstable. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the timing was too perfect. Of course she did. She has to stay the sane one. That's her currency. Charm outside, chaos within. Finally, he opened the folder. His eyes scanned, flickered. Slowed. I kept thinking it was my fault, he murmured. That I'd misread her. That I pushed too hard. But she was always pulling me in and pushing me out. She does that. She lets you think you've unlocked something special. Then she punishes you for believing it. He nodded slowly, his hand tightening around the coffee cup. I found a necklace in my glove box. I didn't know it was hers until last week. She never said a word. I sat back. She leaves pieces of herself in other people's lives like their postcards. Reminders that she was there. That she mattered. He looked up at me, finally seeing the full outline of the woman we'd both lost to an illusion. So what now, he asked. You do what you want. Burn it. Keep it. Forget it. But at least now you're not in the dark. He closed the folder. I believed her, you know? Even when she lied, I believed she meant well. I know, I said. So did I. Until the day she didn't flinch when it all came crashing down. We stood. No handshake still. Just understanding. Why did you do this? He asked. Because someone sent me a letter, I said. And they didn't have to. But it changed everything. He nodded, then walked out, folder under his arm. I stayed behind. Ordered coffee. Black. As I sipped it, I thought about the letter, the timing, the anonymity. Someone out there had watched her path before mine. Someone who had once stood where I stood, heart cracked but not shattered, holding a truth too painful to carry alone. I owed them more than gratitude. I owed them continuation. And that's when I decided what to do next. I'd write back. Not to them, whoever they were, but to others. A letter. No return address. No accusation. Just clarity. A map for the next person lost in the maze she draws around herself. The myth wouldn't survive transparency. Not anymore. I didn't write the letter that night. I started it. Typed and deleted. Rewrote the first line 6 different ways before closing the laptop and walking to the window. The house was too quiet again, but now it felt like mine. The walls no longer echoed her voice. The silence no longer asked me if I was enough. But the letter, it needed precision. Not rage. Not pity. Just truth. The kind of truth that leaves a mark deeper than scars, understanding. I waited 2 days. Let the impulse settle. Let my mind sort through the wreckage until I could see the blueprints of the story that needed to be told. Then I sat down again. And this time I wrote the letter in one sitting. No salutation. No name. You don't know me. But if you're reading this, you've already felt it. That flicker of something off, too smooth, too perfect. That strange hollow after every conversation with her where you felt like you said everything right but still came out wrong. You're not crazy. She'll tell you things that sound like honesty, but they're rehearsed. Painfully elegant confessions that don't really confess anything. Just enough to seem raw. Just enough to make you feel closer. That's the hook. She never shows her full hand, only the cards she wants you to fall for. You'll feel like you failed her, like you were almost good enough. But that's the trick, she doesn't want enough. She wants adoration. She wants validation in the form of your silence, your doubt, your loyalty to a version of her that doesn't exist. When you catch her lying, she'll look wounded. She'll say you misunderstood. She'll flip the narrative so gently you'll apologize for bleeding from a knife she swears she never held. I know because I've lived it. I stood where you're standing now. And I wanted to believe. God, I needed to believe. Until she stopped pretending to love me and just loved what I gave her. Access, image, control. And when I exposed the truth, she didn't break down. She recalibrated. Like truth was just another variable in her game. I'm not asking you to leave her. That's your choice. I'm just telling you, if you feel like you're losing yourself, it's not an accident. It's the design. I printed the letter. One copy. Folded it. No envelope. And I left it in a place I knew someone would find it, where I had found the first one. Same bench. Same park. Under the corner of the old stone plaque with chipped lettering and moss creeping along the edges. A legacy of sorts. Not revenge. Not warning. Just witness. As I walked away, a strange calm settled over me, not relief. Not triumph. Closure. Not because she apologized. She never would. Not because I got revenge. I didn't want it. But because I had finally done the one thing she never expected. I made peace with the truth, and I didn't need her to hear it. Weeks passed. Then a month. No more texts from her. No unexpected knocks. No new whispers clawing their way into my phone from people trying to piece together the ruins like amateur archaeologists of gossip. The silence held. This time, it felt earned. The house became mine again, truly. I rearranged the furniture. Repainted the living room. Changed the locks. Bit by bit, I stripped every trace of her design until nothing she touched remained untouched. What replaced it wasn't beautiful, not yet, but it was honest. That was the new aesthetic, truth over style. One Saturday morning, I found myself at the park again. Not to check on the letter. Not really. But I sat at the same bench. The stone plaque still chipped. The air still heavy with city sounds and distant laughter. A young couple walked by, arguing gently about directions. He was wrong. She knew it. But she let him believe it a little longer. I smiled at that. Then a woman sat beside me. Late 30s, dark coat, sunglasses. She didn't look at me. Didn't speak. But after a few quiet minutes, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Set it between us. Not directly handed, but placed intentionally. I looked at it. Didn't touch it. I found yours, she said quietly. 3 weeks ago. I turned to her slowly. I'm not here to talk, she added. I just wanted you to know it helped. Still, she didn't look at me. Then she stood. Left the paper where it was. Walked away. I picked it up only after she vanished into the crowd. Unfolded it. Just one line, written in small, steady handwriting. Thank you for telling the truth first. That's when I understood. It wasn't about her anymore. It never really was. This whole time, I'd been circling the collapse of a marriage. But what I was really unearthing was a pattern. A network of people like me, taught to mistrust themselves, trained to mistake performance for affection, gaslit until silence felt safer than speaking. But now the silence was gone. And not just for me. I walked home differently that day. Not faster. Not lighter. Just with purpose. I knew who I was again. Not the man she bent, not the version she painted, not the fool in the suit at the party who caught a bra in front of strangers and smiled like it didn't sting. I was the man who stayed standing. The man who didn't retaliate with cruelty, who didn't crawl back, who didn't rewrite the story just to protect the wrong person. I was the man who held up the mirror. And walked away.